What's up guys, this is Alex. Today I want to share with you a very simple trick to make your strings sound more full. The trick revolves around using sub-bass along with your strings. So we're gonna go over layering and synthesis in this tutorial. And this tutorial is based on a track that I wrote yesterday in, I made a recording of me composing this track from scratch. It's not complete as a track, but it can be very instructive for you to watch how I composed it. So if you're interested in that, check out the live stream video I posted yesterday on this YouTube channel. But yeah, without further ado, let's listen to the example and let's get in the tutorial. So we're going to use this as an example, this chord progression as an example of this tutorial. So this is what I mean with sound more full and warm. Now, as for writing for strings, I made a tutorial about that. That's the first tutorial I ever made. So if you want to learn how to write sustained strings that sound like this, realistic, etc., and you want to learn what the hell these curves are, check out the tutorial about strings. I also made a tutorial about how to write chord progressions by ear. I wrote this chord progression by ear using the technique I explained in that tutorial, which I'm not going to repeat here. So if you want to learn that, check out the tutorial on chords. You can find it on this channel. But today I just want to talk about the way these strings are layered and made. Now, as you see here, I'm using cinematic strings too from Kontakt. I guess it's a Kontakt library, and I'm using an ensemble patch for this part. Now, the ensemble patch contains the whole string section, and while I prefer to use split strings patches like violas, violins, etc., in this case I just use an ensemble. And the thing I did is that I made sure that this chord progression was playing in many different octaves to reach multiple registers. So here, for example, we are so low that we only have double basses. Or here we have cellos and basses. This must be like cellos and violas. And this must be, violas plus violins. So the whole thing sounds pretty full because we have the whole string section, but mostly I think the best, the most important detail in terms of warmth and fullness is usually the bass. And if I were to remove this sub-bass layer, let's actually listen to this part again, and I'm gonna toggle the sub-bass on and off because the sub-bass is the trick I want to mention today. So this is what it sounds like if I toggle it on and off. So if you have a good subwoofer or good headphones, you might have noticed that when I toggled it off, there was a little, decrease of warmth in the strings. Now, the reason is, layering. I explained layering in the how to create huge cinematic impacts with layering tutorial, but I'm going to do it here again with strings and bass. Now, as I said, I'm using the whole string family here, right? But the lowest of the strings instrument, which is are the double basses, they tend to they go very low. But in terms of frequencies, there are some very low frequencies they don't reach. So let's take, for example, the lowest note in this progression. You see how it's sort of almost ignoring the 20 to 60 frequencies. That area is not reachable with double basses, which means it's not which are, the lowest instruments in the string family. And yeah, one way you could fix it would be probably increasing the hell out of those frequencies, but it's not going to sound organic. See, it sounds a bit strange because you're boosting frequencies that are almost non-existent. So you boost the noise and the air and the recording. That's no, that's not good. So what you want to do is to use an instrument that instead plays mostly in those areas. Now, I'm not sure if there are, in the orchestra, if there are many instruments that go lower than the double basses and that have such a soft sound. So what you can do is use a sub bass. So the sub bass that we heard, if I were to isolate it, this is what in terms of frequencies, this is what it would look like in terms of frequencies. So see, it's playing exactly in those notes, in those frequencies that are not that much populated by the strings, from around 80 to 30. So what it's doing is just populating frequencies that the strings are not taking care of. The thing though is that if you use sub bass like this, you can emulate, the sort of like shape of sound of the strings. So I'm gonna explain it to you now. So this sub bass is just a super simple synth patch. Now, if you do not know synthesizers, I'm gonna do a very super fast lessons about synthesis right now, but I'm gonna make better tutorials about it because it's a very deep subject. But to understand sub bass, I need to to understand a bit of synthesis. So when you open a synthesizer, you tend to have oscillators, which are like sounds like this. Very basic sounds. And from these sounds, you tend to add effects and processing in such a way that they turn to be incredible sounds. At the basics, but the thing you need to understand is that at the base of every huge synthetic sound, there are oscillators usually. For the sub bass, for oscillators, there are multiple types. There's like the basic sine wave, there's like the square, and the saw wave, and then a few other oscillators. But now for the sub bass, I use the sine wave, which is this one. Now the sine wave is usually the most rounded sort of like oscillator, and it's very used for sub, along with oscillators, but we're gonna use the sine wave. So as you heard, what we want here is a sound that first goes lower than the strings, so it needs to be very low in terms of pitch. So I'm gonna go here and reduce this to 0, like it takes it down 2 octaves, so that if I play it now, I'm just gonna be on very low frequencies. I could also keep it to 24 and just play super low notes on my keyboard, but I prefer to take it down and just play normal notes. So first thing you do is to reduce the pitch. The second thing we want is actually for this sub to have the same sort of shape as the strings. Strings, when you play them, they are like soft like this. Like they don't have a super fast, like when you play a sustained articulation, it's sort of like a pad, like gentle attack, goes in slowly and fades out a little bit, not instantly, but slowly. What we have here, and it's gonna be way more noticeable if I use the sawtooth, is, you see the attack is super fast. And that's not what we want. So we take this, sine wave as I showed you, and then we go here in the volume envelope. This allows you to pretty much tweak the way your oscillators are, how their volume is behaving, sort of. So if I have this and I set it to this, very fast attack and super fast decay, this is what it would sound like. Sort of like a pluck. This is not what we want. We want a sustained sound, which means that we want something that has a sort of a slow attack and that releases over time in a very slow way, not fast like this. So the first thing you might want to do is to increase the attack of the envelope. So it's a bit gentler. Then the second thing I did is to increase the decay. The decay kind of determines how fast or slowly your sound decays in terms of volume as you hold the note. So since we're gonna emulate sustained strings, we're just gonna hold the note a little bit, right? And we want the sub to be present as we hold the note. So I increase the decay. And I increase it just about enough. Now I'm also going to increase the release because this kind of determines how fast your volume fades out as you release the held note. And I want it to release a little bit, slow, like a string instrument. So now we have this shape, which is like the shape of a string instrument. Very gentle, and it has that nice release and stuff like that. And since we're using a sine wave and we're using it at low octaves and pitch, then it's gonna pretty much take care of the register that the double basses are not reaching. And since it's like we made this so similar to strings in terms of its shape and stuff like that, it's gonna layer with strings very naturally. It's not gonna be hearable because it's very gentle in terms of sound. It's very similar to the strings in terms of shape, but it's still like we're still gonna notice it, right? Because it's laying in the frequencies that the strings are not reaching. Now, at the basis, like the base of all layering is this: the thinking of putting things together in such a way that one takes care of an area or characteristic that the other is not taking care of. The strings are taking care of like the low end to the mid-high range, but they are not taking care of the sub. The sub is taking care of the sub alone and leaving the rest for the strings. That's why when we put them together, they sound so great. If I were to, create the same thing, the sub, but with the sound, higher octaves, and, with different characteristics from the sine wave, wouldn't sound as good. Although sometimes you can, use sub basses that are a bit, more particular. So for example, there's this one that I use. This one I made it with Jaeger, and it sounds sort of like this. And you see, we have two layers. One is doing this, and the other is doing this. So yeah, it's not like this one is kind of sharp as a sub bass, but still very dominant in the low frequencies that we need it to reach. Now, this one, I use it for more aggressive type of orchestrations, usually. While, this here, like very soft sine wave that I showed you, I use it for, softer stuff, and when I don't want it to be as much invasive. Another thing I do, and this is something you do to taste, is to, reduce the volume of the sub in such a way that it doesn't take over the strings so much, Because again, this is not a natural sound. You wouldn't hear it in the orchestra, I think. So it depends. If you're writing an orchestration that you need to sound as natural as possible, it might be a good idea to not even use the sub bass, or maybe use something more natural, like, I don't know, use bassoons. I think bassoons go lower than double basses. I'm not sure, but yeah, it would be more natural to layer your bass with orchestral instruments. But if you have to do something where you're more free to do whatever the hell you want, like I was here, you can use a sub bass and you can get good results with it. And another thing I did is add some compression to make sure that the sub bass stays constant, independently of the note it's playing. Because I noticed it on some notes, this sine wave was kind of more powerful than on others, so I used compression to make it, powerful on all the notes. And yeah, I'm not sure if I made a tutorial about compression. So if you want to learn more about compression, check out that tutorial. I'm not going to explain that here, but yeah, that's pretty much what I did. Add a sub bass, and the formula is that use a sine wave and a bit of attack, enough decay and release to make it string-like, and put it on your strings and let it play like the bass notes. That's what I did here. I took the bass notes of this chord progression, and those are the ones I triggered on the sub bass. Another thing you might want to avoid on your sub bass is to play, like, for example, chords. Doesn't make sense to play chords on sub bass, because if you do, it generally isn't gonna sound good. And here somewhere, I'm not sure where I did it, but yeah, I cannot find it now. But I put it here, I think. Yeah, if I put this in such a way that you can only play one note at a time, so I cannot play chords with it. Because if you play like chords with bass instruments, it's like strange oscillation. So ideally, you just want to play one note at a time. And if that's like that note, you let it be the bass note, the root note of your chord progression, and you place it below your chord progression. I think that's gonna sound amazing. Always has sounded amazing for me, and every time I used it. So that's pretty much the simple trick I wanted to show you today. And sorry if this was kind of long, even though the trick was kind of simple, but I always want to teach why things work the way they do, opposed to just saying, hey, this is the formula, do it and it's gonna work. Because I think the best way to educate yourself is to understand how and why things work. And this is exactly what this channel is dedicated about, understanding how the orchestra works and why it sounds the way it does when you write great orchestrations, for example. So if you want to learn how to write orchestral music and really understand how it's made and how to produce music like a pro and stuff like that, check out the rest of this channel because there are lots of tutorials about that. I also recommend to check out the Avalon course, Cinematic Music. There's also one now about cinematic synthesis, and you're gonna find both in the description of this video the links to buy the courses, and those are freaking amazing. I highly recommend them. So if you're interested, go check out those tutorials. And this thing you heard now, this track, I didn't show you the first part, but yeah, this thing I wrote here, I actually made a live stream recording of me composing this thing from scratch. So if you're interested in seeing me composing this fantasy track from scratch, there's that live stream video on this channel you can check out. I posted it yesterday. So yeah, that's it for this tutorial. I hope it was helpful, and I'll see you in the next one.